Okay, so welcome to our first webinar for 2014. Very excited to start the series for the year. And like many companies, we start the year by looking in the past and just kind of highlighting the things that came out in the product in 2013 that we feel are benefits to the product that we want to make sure everyone's aware of and share. And then talk a little bit about our release management activities. Since many of you are active in our user community, one thing I'd like to start off with is just letting you know we have established OpenAir user groups for all of 2014. They're posted on our website, on our page. We have been coordinating with NetSuite, so NetSuite is offering their facilities in certain cities. And then for cities that we're going to more than once during the year, we'll be looking for a customer location. So we'll have sort of the best of both worlds. And right away we're starting off in the San Francisco, San Diego area in February on the 20th for San Francisco and on the 21st for San Diego. And then in March we're going to move on to the East Coast with Charlotte and Atlanta. So we hope to find you in those locations if you can make time in your schedule to join us. The next webinar series item will be about advanced form permissions and the scripting. So we're going to talk about the fact that these features came out in 2013. But they do warrant a whole lot more discussion than what I'm going to be touching on today. So our next webinar is going to be dedicated to that. And that's next Thursday, February 13th. And then if you did not get a save the date or any kind of reminder, I believe the SuiteWorld online registration opened up last week. And we will be a sponsor again this year, so we hope to see you at SuiteWorld. But let's get to the content of what you really wanted to join the webinar for. So what I did was I went back through the releases, and there were 5 releases last year. Because starting in the middle of 2013, the release frequency changed from every 6 to 8 weeks to quarterly to more align with the NetSuite product base versus OpenAir always had their own release schedule, so now things are more aligned. So releases now will come out 4 times a year. And the first half of the year we had a January, then a March, and then a May, and then of course August and November. So I went back and looked at what came out in January, a whole year ago, and what was the highlight in that release. And there were really 3 that caught my eye that I thought I would make sure everyone's aware of. So of course the Android mobile app came out. This one is the very much anticipated partner to the iPhone app and the BlackBerry app. It works very similar to the iPhone app if you're familiar with that one. It does a real-time sync. So it's not a batch synchronization like the BlackBerry. It's more real-time like the iPhone. So every action you take does a synchronization with the online system. And it does support everything with the phone, with the photos and the receipts and the attachments and synchronizing those attachment photos to the online system. So it's a very nice device. I had an Android when it actually came out, and it worked great on my Android. So if it's something that your organization is interested in, I definitely recommend trying using that application. The little icon that you see on the slide is what it looks like in the Google Play Store that you can download and install. You can actually get it. You cannot download it from within OpenAir like you can the BlackBerry app. Similar to the iPhone, you get it from the store posting the App Store. So the iPhone app you get from iTunes, the Android app you get from the Google Play Store. The next one was sort of a little subtle feature that came out, but I think it's very important for many customers that want to pass on those receipts that go along with the invoices. So it may introduce some policy and procedure changes, but it was a way to pass expense receipts that are attached to expense reports in OpenAir automatically onto the invoice that is generated with the expense charges from those expense reports. So some of you had been going through the process of downloading the expense receipts or scanning in receipts and then attaching them to the invoice. Now there's actually a connection, a pass-through, which is a big time savings if this is a requirement in your invoicing process. And of course if you're invoicing customers out of OpenAir. So if you're not familiar with it, what the feature actually is, it's just a very subtle change, and it's found on the invoice layout actually. So the invoice layout is in the administration area of the system under the invoice settings area where you can configure how your invoice looks. And one of the areas about halfway down the form, you'll see two new checkboxes that showed up, and it's called Add Attachment Link to Invoice View and Include Attachment Download File with Generating PDF. And by checking those boxes, what happens essentially is the layout adds additional feature control to the invoice. And I've got a snapshot on the screen of an invoice header, and there's a new link associated to it called Associated Attachments. So those of you who may use receipt attachments, you may be familiar with these type of like links that show up in the header, because the expense report works in a similar way where you can look at the expense report and click on a link to say, give me the attachments at the expense report level or give me the attachments at the receipt level. And when you click on this associated attachments, a window pops up and it actually has all of the attachments that were associated to the receipts that generated into expense billing. So a few dependencies, of course, in order for you to take advantage of this feature. One, you have to attach receipt copies to the receipt form in OpenAir or the expense report form in OpenAir. Two, you have to actually generate billable charges from those expense receipts. So you have to run the receipts that are billable to a client through the expense billing rule. And those create the charges. And then of course you put those on an invoice, and then the link will just index back into the related expense report and understand what those receipts map to. And it's actually something that if you haven't tried this out, and if you're wondering, oh geez, is it one of those things that I put the setting in, but of course it only works on things going forward, right? Actually, the nice thing about this, if I flip the switch, any receipt that has already been generated from an expense report, or any charge on an expense report that already has attachments, those invoices automatically go back and they can look at those. So even historical invoices are updated to have that link. So in the application settings, invoice settings, invoice layouts, just pick any layout. And where it's at, and it may make you a bit dizzy because I'm going to slide down or scroll down, but scroll down into the Other section. And in the Other section, at the bottom of the Other section, you'll see the checkboxes. And then if you go to an invoice that has expenses on it, you can click that Associated Attachments link now. And if there were receipts attached to that expense report, it will bring those in for viewing. Okay. So a nice little feature, a little time-saving feature if you have to pass expense receipt copies over to your customer, which may drive you to adopt the process of attaching receipts in OpenAir, which may drive people to use the mobile apps to take it with the camera. So it all ties together. The other feature that came out, of course, every release has a lot of different features. But the third feature that I wanted to highlight that I found it was interesting, and I did find a couple of very unique cases where I could use this, and I appreciated having this functionality. And it's called the metadate filtering on custom calculations. So to kind of explain where this came from, date filtering on custom calculations was released at the end of 2012. And date filtering, like report date filtering, has date ranges, start and end, last month, this month. You select the word custom, and you get the ability to hard code a start date and a hard code an end date. And on reports, that's used all the time, of course, but custom calculations were sort of at the mercy of the time frame of the report. And I think many customers, including myself, are asking for, well, can I have a couple different fields on the report? Why can't I create a custom calculation that only gives me information up to like last month, and then I can show everything on the report, like year-to-date information, but then segregate information from last month or a specific time period. And so this metadate concept came out in January. And if you haven't seen it before, what it is that you select, instead of the word custom on a date range, you select custom metadate. And when you do that, it activates two other start and end character sets called start metadate and end metadate. And in the selection list is your standard default values, but it adds new values to the list as well, things that were never available before. You would have to sort of type in a hard-coded value. So it's probably easier to see this in the system. So I'm going to go into the system, into the custom calculations area. And scrolling down below the report filters, and if you don't see report filters in your system, I definitely recommend turning that feature on. It came out, I believe, at the beginning of 2012. I want to say the 2011 maybe. But it's an extremely useful feature. The date filters are more recent. And if you scroll down, you can see you can filter on the various types of transactions like a detail report. Recognition transactions, receipts, time entries, invoices, and so forth. So if I go to any of these and I say, okay, time entry date, and I pull down my menu, I see all the standard stuff I usually see when I'm dealing with reports, but this custom metadate gives me the option to select a new start and end date. And the interesting thing about this is that there's no hard coding. You don't type a number or date in here. You select these values. So in order to be as flexible as possible, you get not only the standard list, today, tomorrow, last week, this month, so forth. There's new values that have been added, which I think are a great start to expand the whole reporting time frame functionality within OpenAir. So things like the word past. Okay, past is now a value you can pick. Not only are the months available, but now the days of the week are available. So OpenAir, as you know, understands what a Monday is, but on reports you can't say run this for the date of Monday. You have to put in the date and know that date Monday was the 6th or the 13th or something like that. So now it understands days of the week. And it also understands current accounting periods. So if you're using those accounting periods, now you can set up a report that sort of synchronizes when you flip things. So if you want to do a custom calculation on maybe revenue, revenue for current month, you don't have to rely on the report to be configured to this month or next month or last month. You can just tie this custom calculation to an accounting period, so the report automatically updates that reporting value when you change your accounting period, which could be helpful with reconciling to your accounting system. And then it introduced sort of relative days of the month to the month. So the first of the month, the second, the third, the fourth. Okay, so that's so you don't have to type in January 15th, 2013. You can just say the 15th of the month. So you can have it run on a regular basis every month on that date. And not only does it do it from the first to the first, second, or third, so forth, it also understands from the end of the month. So there's a whole series of days that you can pick, the 9th day of the month to the last day, the 8th to the last day. And I've worked with customers where they have a very, a countdown almost of activities that happen to close the month to close every month, where you have minus 3 days we have to produce this data and minus 2 days. And so you could actually use these ranges to pull information from OpenAir and rely on that information as you're closing the month. So in the example I gave about we have to pull information up to the third day before the end of the month. Of course, the third day before the end of the month changes every month, depending on whether it's 30 days, 31 days, 28 days in the case of February. So you can say, I want this month to be the start date, and then pull third to the last day of the month. So I'm pulling everything up until up to the third day of the month. The third to the last. Well, that's a tongue twister. Third to the last day of the month. And so now I have a range that normally I would have to hard code in OpenAir on reports, and I would have to update it every month, or I'd have to put a custom time range in. So now it's easier because it can always figure it out every time it runs the calculation. So it's interesting because you have these two values, and so you can kind of use them together, come up with some unique concepts that you may have been handling with some manual workarounds on reports before. So that was really the highlights of January. So if we move into March, there were two I kind of pulled into March. And March is where we started hearing about, there might be a new user interface coming. Okay, so it wasn't officially launched until May, so I'm holding that off until the May 2013 release discussion. But March came out with a couple of a couple of, one small, one very large feature, and the larger feature, of course, was the resource bookings approval. But the smaller one, these little tiny enhancements I think are very, if you don't notice them, for some companies they are a huge, huge time saver. And that is just this slight change to invoice list views, project custom fields. And so what's the big deal about this? So the invoice list view is where you can just look at the list of invoices. And if you do project level invoicing, you can see, add the columns of customer and project and invoice total and days outstanding and age and all that kind of stuff to the list view. But for customers that might be geographically dispersed, or they have different departments that are responsible for different projects, or they're responsible for different types of invoices, this feature actually gave them a huge leap forward in the whole view sharing activity. So they would have to understand that, well, I'm responsible for customer 1, customer 5, and customer 7. You're responsible for customer 3 and customer 9. And so they would just have to keep a track of who was in charge of which customers and which projects. And now we can actually relate that to a custom field. I'm responsible for everything in this service offering or this geography. And you can look at the invoices that way by now filtering it by putting those project custom fields as a customized list view. So a big time savings for people who are in a dispersed geography or departmental ownership of invoice management, because now I can do things like, before you couldn't add anything other than your standard fields, client, project, but now I can add like offering as a standard field for top step invoicing. So I can say I'm responsible for all outsourced administration invoices, and so I'm checking to make sure I don't have any of those that are outstanding for payment, and I can filter the invoices based on that data instead of running reports. Okay. But of course the bigger item was resource booking approval. So if you haven't read about this and you use booking requests today, you may want to consider this booking approval. So if you are using booking requests, you can see that from a bookings perspective you have open, submitted, approved, and rejected. So there's a workflow now which goes along with the booking process. So what's the big difference between booking requests and this booking workflow? The big difference is that when you use a booking request, it's almost like passing someone a note on the side. Nobody knows that person is even being discussed unless they see the note. So from a bookings perspective and understanding if people are busy or not, a request does not register on that chart or that view until it's been approved. The booking approval process, you're actually creating a booking, and based on how you set the process up, usually that creation, that open submitted thing, creates sort of a request or a planning or a tentative or a soft booking. So immediately that in-work or that in-review action is part of what the resource scheduling looks like. So the person is reserved almost. It's not approved, it's not confirmed or hard booked or anything like that. It's something that gives you a more automated way to find out if people are sort of being discussed in flight for scheduling. So it's definitely got some advantages in adding and making your approval process more robust and being able to see information as it's dynamically changing. And how it works is basically you turn the feature on and you have a workflow, open, submitted, approved, rejected. And then for each stage you set up a default booking type. So each stage gets a booking type, and you can mimic that same workflow, open, submitted, approved, rejected. But for example, if you create a booking and put it in the open stage, you can call it requested. That would make sense. And when you submit it, it would change to maybe in review. And that would automatically change to in review. And when it's approved, it would automatically change to maybe soft booked or hard booked, however you want it. And each stage can have multiple values, but you pick a default. So as it's moving through the stage, the booking type is automatically changing. Very important for the automated booking type change, because those of you who are using booking types may be relying on that for accurate forecast information, not only from a staffing but from a financial perspective, and that booking type could be a key filter that you're using. So as your scheduling process is going through its workflow and approvals and stuff, all of those types are being kept up to date as well by your default configuration. Okay. So that brings us to May. Now May, of course, was when the big announcement about the user interface change and facelift to OpenAir was made at SuiteWorld, and many customers started getting email notifications about your account's been scheduled to convert. And those of you on this webinar probably are either in the process of converting or have converted or getting ready to convert. So I'll just highlight a few things because that can be a whole nother webinar, is talking about feature functionality of UI3. But what's happened since the UI3 announcement and the rollout of that to the customer base, the UI3 was really one of the first features that OpenAir released that they're really pushing all customers to move to that release, moving all customers onto that new user interface. And I've been working with the product for over 8 years. I've never seen that sort of push that you have to adopt something. So very important UI3 to the technology baseline, because it's also coming along as each of the subsequent releases have come out. Feature functionality is being enhanced to take advantage of the technology that they're putting into the facelift. So I'm sure by now many of you have seen UI3. It's really a major facelift of navigation, the look and feel of the system. But it did come with a couple of features, and one that's very helpful, I think, is the global create functionality. Many of you who have used the system for maybe even longer than I have, the navigation was always find the menu of where the item lives and then go and find the new menu or the create menu and then create the object. And if you had to put a customer PO in the system, you had to actually go into the administration module. So lots of navigation to sort of just create the object you want, and the global create has sort of just removed a ton of clicks that you would normally have to do. Like you can log into the system and create a timesheet in like 2 clicks and not even have to go into the timesheet module anymore. So the global create feature, of course, is probably one of the best things that have come out of the UI. Now it was designed to do dynamic response, and things have been sort of moved around on the page, and that's really, instead of having to scroll up and down, you tend to scroll right and left now, taking advantage of more the width of screens naturally than the length of screens. And of course the navigation shortcuts that are coming along with it. So the modules, you just click on the name of the module at the top, and a lot of things are sort of just click on it versus pulling down menus and stuff. I feel it's more tablet friendly in the new UI. So if you haven't seen it yet, certainly give us a call. We can certainly walk through it with you. If you're planning on doing any kind of, if you're planning on doing the conversion, I definitely recommend, if you have some kind of like large volume of custom fields or some kind of unique feature usage, that you definitely try it out in your sample sandbox that they'll give you to make sure you're comfortable with the UI before you convert, and just get the word out. Communicate, 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 right? So the new UI came along with new dashboard charts. So those of you who have known me for a while, you know that I was always very big on the dashboards in OpenAir. Even though they had limited functionality, they still were able to produce decent charts where you would have line graphs that could compare your forecast to your actuals, and utilization graphs and so forth. But now the one graph that everyone was hollering for was a stacked bar graph, and now it's here. But it's only here if you have UI3. So 5 different charts, new charts came out. Donut, which is like a pie, various version, area, spline, a stacked area, and then horizontal and vertical stack bars. An example is on the screen here about the vertical stack bar. And this is this one I just put together very quickly. It's actually a comparison of billable versus non-billable hours from a ratio perspective. So those of you who have had to deal with those charts where you had the 2 bars next to each other, now you can stack them on top of each other and look at it in more of a ratio perspective, which is very helpful. And if you haven't seen, there's a lot of functionality changes around the dashboard charts now too. So not only, when you open it up, it shows you, sort of fills it in dynamically. It still does not dynamically load the information. You still have to, if you want to refresh it, the refresh is either you click on the pencil to edit it and then hit save, or you just wait for the overnight automated refresh that happens. So that functionality hasn't changed yet. But a couple of things that have really changed a lot, other than the way the look and feel is that if you hover over any of these areas, the value that that it's seeing is now dynamically displayed. So you don't always have to click right into the report. And if you click on these values, they don't bring you to the report anymore. You actually click on the actual report to go to the report, which is nice. And then probably the one thing that a lot of people like is that now you can download this, this into like a PDF, a GIF, that kind of thing. So when you click on, you can print it from here and download it into the various images instead of having to pull out your snapshot tool and grabbing that and shoving it into your PowerPoint. You can download the images directly from the tool itself by clicking on this little 3-line menu. The 3-line menu ended up somewhere, so here it is, the 3-line menu in the chart here. Okay. Still same functionality as far as being able to do dashboard, the different tabs and stuff like that, but the charts are now more interactive and feel more like a dashboard chart that you can see. You still have to do the manual refresh if you want it refreshed more than once a day. And then here's another one of those features. Geez, it's really helpful, but you probably didn't even notice it showed up. You assumed it was always there. And that's a toggle close feature. So a toggle delete feature came out in, I think it was 2012. So if you were dealing with a large volume of tasks in the project, it was always helpful to be able to sort of clean that up. You were copying over a template, but you copied over way too many tasks. You would always have to sort of go through and you'd have to go check, 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 and then hit save on the task grid. So if you're using the task grid, it was a way to do sort of a mass delete, but you still had to check every box. And so they introduced, a toggle feature for the delete, or they introduced a select all for the delete function. So now they did the same thing for the close function. I find this one more helpful because if you're managing a project, you're probably closing sections of the project off to make sure people are not inadvertently recording things against phase 1 when they're on phase 3. So you can do this now quickly. There's an all yes and all no option when you deal with UI3. And in the UI2, it's also supported in UI2, but now it's just like a toggle switch. You click it once and it selects all the items. So another just helpful things for the PMs that are managing projects. So that brings us to August. And August was, the UI was a big announcement, and that was a big change to the system. And of course, that kept everyone very busy, including ourselves throughout the summer months, wondering when are we going to convert, how are we going to convert, learning as much as we could about the new UI. And then August comes along, and the new technology immediately is showing its value by having all of these form control enhancements. So this is some of the stuff we'll be talking about in the next webinar, but I just wanted to introduce these here. The form control enhancements were officially called the custom event message, the query-related data, and the limited field value. So let's talk a little bit about what those were. Okay. So the custom event message was the first time you've been able to sort of customize the error messages that would occur on the page itself, on a properties page if you hit the Save button. And in the past you'd always get the message that says, you have 5 errors on this page. And so you'd have to scroll down and find the red 1s and 2s and 3s and figure those out, then hit Save. So now on form permissions, you actually can create your own messages. So instead of saying, this is just required, and a message comes up saying, oh, you have an error on this field, and you scroll down and you find out, oh, that field's required conditionally because I selected Project Stage Live or something like that. Now you can actually customize the message to say, field so-and-so is required because you're in Project Stage Live. Okay. So how you do that is on the form permission, the form rules and form permissions, and I'll show you where that is in the system. There's a new section on the form that says custom message will be displayed if this situation occurs. So a custom message will be displayed if the notes field isn't filled in on this example on the screen. And you can tell what the severity of the message is, like informational warning, error, so forth. And the information warning or error really just gives you a color coding of the message at the top. So if it's informational, it's green. If it's error, it's red. If it's a warning, it's yellow. And then you put a message and then you hit Save. Okay. So what happens is that the the warning, the error, and the information actually don't change whether you can save a form or not, honestly. Let's go to, there we go. There we go. So let's go to this form here, and if I select like a form permission, so quite a few things have changed on the form permission. So they've added some sort of navigation control, color coding to say, oh, green's required, that kind of thing. Gray is hidden. And then if you scroll down to your permission rules area, if you click on the Create Permission Rule, the permission rule is a newer feature that came out, again, I want to say 2012, 2011, where you can conditionally add rules that would either require something to happen or hide fields if certain things were true. So it gave you ways to customize the forms, not only by the role of the person, but by the actions or the field settings that they were putting in the system. And so one of the sections down here is the customize and custom message will be displayed. So if you check that and you select one of these custom messages, it will display at the top should that condition actually be met. The message itself, whether it's an error, a warning, or information at this point, doesn't stop you from actually doing the save. It just gives you the error message, but definitely leading toward the fact that it will actually have that additional understanding because it has these categories underneath the definitions right now. So that's where the custom messages. So definitely an initial step to introduce this feature functionality, and then I expect it to be built out even more going forward. Now query-related data. Query-related data, in my mind, is just really comparing one field value to another field value. So I guess they had to call it a name, and it's called query-related data. So I can understand their quandary. But really what it was is if you want to make sure values are related to each other. So like the example on the screen here, the start date is greater than maybe the sale date or the order close date or something like that. So you can actually add conditions that now compare the value of one field to the value of another. And of course the comparison is the same thing as like greater than, less than, equal to, is blank, is not blank, things like that that have always been there for the conditional rules. Then of course if you can combine this with the custom error message, so now if you have some kind of sort of field logic error, you can customize the message to explain what's wrong with the form itself. And then limit field values. This one surprised me. I was really happy to see this come out. But basically being able to say, okay, I have a drop-down menu, and if you have a drop-down field, you always see all the values. There was never any kind of control on the drop-down values unless you used the field dependency feature, which you would be able to have a drop-down that would be dependent on a previous drop-down value. So that was actually a custom field configuration where you related values of one custom field to define more of a hierarchy inheritance type thing of a second custom field. That feature is still available. But now actually dynamically on the forms themselves, the individual forms, you can, based on whatever controls you want to put in place, that you are controlling the values of the fields based on the dynamics of what's being entered into the form itself. And the example here on the screen is a great example. So you're setting up a task, you've checked that non-billable checkbox. So the task type dropdown really shouldn't have anything other than non-billable type of tasks. So a little bit of a check and balance, so that you're selecting the non-billable, but now your task type can match and make sure you don't get out of sync by accidental setting. So all those form things, again, those are more behind the scenes. So from an end user perspective, I mean, the release had a lot of stuff in it. These are the items that we felt were very important, very useful, because it would give administrators an ability to customize the experience and and really guide people on how to fill forms out versus if I see a field, I think I must fill it in. Okay, so the form permissions are always, have always been an important feature in the system, but now they're getting a lot more control and intelligence behind them. So you can expand, build on the experience for the user and help guide them through those form completions. And now we're in November, so just 2 months ago, some very important items came out. A couple of sort of one-offs like the profile type security access came out, but some really important new features came out again because taking advantage of the new user interface. And report portlets is one of them. So an interesting concept, but it really gives you more of a real dashboard type of view. OpenAir always had the ability to run reports from the home page. It was something that you would actually scroll to the bottom of your home page. There was a little link that said reports, and so you could add the names of reports there. And in order to see them, you would click on the name of the report, and it would launch a pop-up window, and it would show you the results of the report. Now you can actually insert the report directly on your home page, have it opened up and viewing the information right away as soon as you log in. So you don't have to click and run anything. It just appears when you log in to the system. And you have the ability to sort of move things around a little bit, so it's more of an interactive report than even from the reports module. And how you add it is, again, that global create feature, real helpful. Just add a new report to the home module, and it'll come up with a very simple request. What's the report that you want? And you can change the report title if you want. Otherwise, it'll default to the report name. And then click Save, and what it'll do is it'll create a tile on that home page to go along with all the other tiles that you have standard, and it will have the report in it. It just runs the report, and you can interact with that report in the portlet. Now they're still working through some of the feature functionality of it, but it's again, it's a good start to a new, to having a more useful home page than just a message, right? So if I go to the home page, here's a portlet I put on here, and I can take a look at it. It runs, and I can open it up and take a look and see what my forecast is. I can pull each of the columns. I can sort, so I can interact with it just like I can with any report. Okay, hide all, show all, that kind of thing. So very nice. Now you can have this dashboard instead of, I still have my little reports tile here, and if I wanted to, I could add a report here and click on that and have it run. And like I said, it sort of runs and then shows you the results, so I can do a real-time run. But the portlet just gives me my report. And I can just close it up, and there I go. And then when I read the release notes for this, I was so happy. It was the form rules to hide the save and delete button. So many of you have asked the question, isn't there a way for us to conditionally stop people from saving the form or stop people from deleting the object? Like, how can I hide those save and delete buttons conditionally? And you can't. You couldn't until November. So now you can, and it comes automatically in your system. So if you ever had a need for this, now is the time to start going back and finding out where that sticky note was to remind yourself, when it comes out, I need to be able to do this in the system. And really it's things like I work with customers where they have an Amex import feed, and you don't want people just deleting those receipts because they were imported into the system. So how can you prevent them from deleting the receipt? Well, you can remove the delete button based on the fact that maybe you have a custom field that says this was from Amex. And so now I said, well, if this custom field says this was from Amex, hide the delete button so they can't delete it out of the system anymore. And of course, an administrator may always, you may want to let an administrator still do it, but now you can do that save and delete. For the longest time, people would want to be able to conditionally hide that, and now you can. So have a good time going back through your system and trying that out. And then profile types. So many customers, the profiles area of OpenAir is where skill databases are. Some customers are using this functionality. when they have a skill set that is part of their resource management functionality, where they want to be able to search on skills, find people with certain skills, like language. Can you speak a certain language is always a great skill. Our recommendation when people put skill databases in place is make sure the skill database is not something that has to change a lot. So if there's I like mac and cheese this week, and next week I like barbecue beef, I don't have to continually go into my profile every week and update it because my preferences have changed, or like a versioning of a product. I know Internet Explorer 1.10 really well, and then 1.1, 1.10.2 comes out, 1.10.4 comes out. Is it really important for you to know all of those individual versions? So the less dynamic the values are in your skill profile is, the more useful and up-to-date the profile ends up being. But there have been occasions where people are like, I really need to be able to track certain pieces of information, but they should have a restricted view. And data view access, permission to see personal information is a very sensitive topic. So they introduced this feature where you can actually set up a profile, and if it's something that people feel is a sensitive HR topic, maybe it's immigration status or citizenship or something like that, that profile element can now be flagged as restricted. So it's on the actual setting up of the skill database. There's a column now called restricted, and if you identify that profile type as restricted, then only people with OpenAir roles that are allowed to see restricted profiles can see that data when they're doing a search or when they're looking at people's profiles. They'll be prevented from seeing anything that's restricted. Now, it's not at the actual individual profile type. It's either an all or nothing. So the restricted is still, if you have sort of different levels of sensitivity, this is really just a one-level sensitivity type feature at the moment. But it does give you that additional feature that you may have been needing to implement, but you haven't been able to, simply because either you shut people off from seeing their profile or you allow them to see it, but you can't put that sensitive piece of information in. And it may be critical to like performance compensation type things that you want to track in OpenAir. And then finally, a really big feature that when it came out, had lots of emails coming in asking, well, geez, let's talk about this. This is really interesting. Have you tried this out? What can this do? And it's user scripting. So it allows you to have JavaScripts that can be added to forms, and they execute based on an event. Like before the actual save happens, like you click on the save button, before the actual save of the record happens, this script runs. Or maybe it saves to the record to the database, and then it runs a script. So a lot of like trigger-based functionality, and OpenAir traditionally has not had trigger-based functionality that you could customize. So like with a script like this. So this is a very exciting part of the system that we'll continually build out, and I'm very interested to hear from the user community what creative ideas people bring in using user scripting. So we're going to talk more about this topic. It just came out in November, and of course this is the play time. Everyone's playing with it right now to see what we can actually do with it. And we'll talk more about this in the February webinar on the 13th. So those were our highlights of 2013. Of course, the releases themselves have tons of features in them. Some releases are more populated with feature functionality than others, simply because like UI3 took a lot of resources last year, I believe, and some features are just larger, take larger time to develop. So there's always other things in the releases that are useful, and we really encourage people to keep up on the releases. Don't miss any of that release information. And if you're interested, we do have something called a release management offering that we have plenty of customers on that you're welcome to talk to and get their opinion on it, but we provide a very detailed analysis and testing of all of the features as they come out. We know a lot of the features that people are using on a regular basis, how they're using it on a regular basis, and so we try to test to those concepts and let people know dependencies or limitations, or maybe communicating with OpenAir support to see what kind of adjustments or fixes can be made for maybe some defects that we have found, or some usability issues that we report on a regular basis. So if you're definitely interested in knowing more about this or joining us, it's an annual fee. It's a small annual fee actually, and I'll even give you 15% off if you email info@topstepconsulting.com, and of course you can always email me direct. Both of them come to me by the end of this month, so if you're interested, definitely don't pass up on this, this cost. Okay, well, we're almost at the top of the hour, so really appreciate you guys joining us for the first webinar of 2014. If you do want any more information about us, feel free to email us at info@topstepconsulting.com. Of course, we've got lots of information on our website. This webinar will be on our website along with the webinars that we've been doing, honestly, for the past 3 years, believe it or not, we've been doing these. So they're all out there for your listening pleasure. And we have tips books out there. We are contributors of the OpenAir user group, so please definitely looking forward to engaging with you in the community and sharing the knowledge that we have. So have a good rest of the day, everyone, and we'll talk with you next month.
Bye.